Previously in Hedge Knights, Tangier, Sapo, and Dave departed on a quest to mine surface iron and uproot a salix tree to relocate it back to the bison glade. Dave and Sapo constructed a log cabin, and Tangier mined surface iron. Back in the keep, Megahoof milled wheat by hand to keep the bisons fed, while the new Nutrifungus field grew. Sapo attempted to uproot a salix tree, but the two trees he uprooted quickly disintegrated, so he resorted to hacking up a section of salix roots for Megahoof to study instead. And a raid attacked the keep, breached several sections of the walls, and set a small fire in the farm, but were ultimately defeated and fled. Episode 16, Faith. The Adlets of the Bison Glade were happy to be together once again. A lot of repairs needed to be done to the curtain wall and gate as a result of the last raid. The Glade members expressed their wishes for a room dedicated to prayer and community. Megahoof agreed, but only after the gate was finished and a new, smaller bison pen constructed to help deal with the bison population problem. The squires had met in agreement that the keep could not support the bison herd to grow any further, but instead of sterilizing Mojo, a better idea was proposed to create a separate pen for him and one of the youngest bisons to keep him company, to help prevent the Glade members from running out of food while trying to feed so many bison. The Adlets were also very eager for Megahoof to start researching the salix roots, and Judea set it up next to his research table and scrawled a note that he should get started immediately. Nobody was more eager to unlock the secrets of the salix tree than Megahoof. Sapo had recounted his observations of the rapidly disintegrating tree multiple times as Megahoof mulled over the details like a puzzle. The community needed him to solve this puzzle, but there were still too many pieces missing for him to draw conclusions. He mentally prepared himself for a long season of intense study. Megahoof told the three masons to take some of the newly acquired iron and construct lanterns for the gatehouse to keep it well illuminated. He hoped that a well-illuminated gatehouse would deter raid parties, but if not, at the very least it would aid their efforts in defending the gate. Many of the Adlets laughed when Megahoof originally had the giant smelter constructed because it accommodated far more iron ore than they had ever come in contact with. Now, as Arauco spent the better half of his morning shoveling iron ore and coal into the smelter, those doubters realized how truly visionary Megahoof seemed to be. Today is Madzie's birthday, and she enters her teen years, an age where she can decide what sort of skills she'd like to pursue as an adult. She told the others she wants to help build and maintain the strong defenses of the keep, but also defend it with sword and shield, just like Lazarus, and provide iron and coal, just like Tangier. Lazarus told Madzi that he'd be happy to forge her arms and armor once she finished growing, but for now she should focus on her archery skills instead. The Masons, eager to start construction on a room dedicated to prayer and faith, quickly marked out a tiny pen able to comfortably accommodate Mojo and Moxie. Sapo led the two bison out of the old pen and into the new one. Separating the patriarch from the matriarch of the herd would stop the herd from its unsustainable growth, but also allow Mojo to sire more offspring if the glades ever become more purified. Tangier continued to chip away at the stone outcroppings around the bison glade to both help fuel the stone cutting needed for a new prayer room, and also to offer respite to all the other adlets that scrub the keep of pollution when it spreads. The first batch of iron casting finished in the smelter, and the Atlets now had plenty of iron for construction, weapons, and armor. Madzi noticed the bison had broken out of their pen in search of food, and rather than inform another adult, she decided to handle it on her own. She grabbed armfuls of fungus and filled the barns, and then hauled the bison wool away that had been sheared but not yet properly stored. There didn't seem to be space to store the excess wool on the normal shelves, so she hauled it to the storage corner and hoped that someone else would deal with it later on. The high-pitched squeaks of a maddened waste rat echoed through the keep halls. Madzi jumped at the opportunity to practice her archery skills, just as Lazarus suggested. She had watched the other adlets knock arrows, aim, and release countless times. She had even practiced a bit in her studies as a child, but never used a bow and arrow for real. Her heart was racing, and the first arrow she released went wide as a result. She took a deep breath, relaxed her shoulders, exhaled, and released an arrow, leading the waste rat by a few paces. A perfect shot. She couldn't wait to tell the others. The small outer courtyard with cavalry spikes and limestone trenches remained darkened, while all of the merlons glowed with a warm and flickering light, casting many tiny shadows through the arrow loops of the gatehouse. The design was impressive and imposing, hopefully a functional deterrent for monsters. Only about a dozen square meters of slate flagstone remained until the gatehouse was complete. As Megahoof promised, the next project would be a room for quiet prayer and community, and all of the Adlets deeply desired such a room to be dedicated within the halls of the keep. Now that all the iron gatehouse lanterns were built, Lazarus started collecting ingots for a new suit of armor. The auxiliary bison pen was built, and the gatehouse nearly finished, so Judea planned on building a dedicated bench for sculptures to allow Oralco to carve art for the new prayer room. The squires planned for the prayer room as a new wing off of the main keep, rather than a standalone building on its own. Initially, the room wouldn't be designated to be cleaned of pollution because unfortunately the 3 trees in the glade simply couldn't handle the influx. The hope was that once Megahoof figured out how to relocate trees to their glade, they'd be able to purify their prayer room. Lazarus struck his hammer against the softened iron. Each strike shaped the metal closer and closer towards its final form. His eyes strained from the glow and his arm tired from the labor, but the excitement of being the first true armorsmith in many generations spurred him on. As he worked, the other Adlets tended the smelter, collecting the near-liquid iron into ingot molds and feeding the bloomery ample coal and iron ore. The heat was intense, and often Lazarus would take breaks in the outdoor wintry air. Judea spotted lit torches to the east and signaled to the others of an incoming raid. The squires had discussed with Madzi that she'd be allowed to fight in the keep's defense, but if any adult told her to seek shelter, there'd be no argument. The attackers approached from the north, and Megahoof shouted the order to man the northern Merlin. Madzi was told to guard the gatehouse with Lazarus behind the arrow loops. Through all the collective efforts of the Adlets, the fields surrounding the northern Merlin were largely stripped of trees and stone, offering the enemy bowmen no cover from the barrage of arrows from the Adlets. The archers headed towards the main gatehouse. Tangier and Dave stood behind Lazarus with bows drawn, hoping to wound the monsters that were attacking him, while the other archers filled the southern Merlin. Megahoof instructed the others to aim for the enemies with the most dangerous-looking weapons or wearing the least protective armor. He noticed that in past raids, the raiders would flee once their numbers were called, so his standing order was to call the weakest and most dangerous first so they could quickly contain the threat. The outer courtyard filled with corpses and blood as the monsters were repelled from the gate. Lazarus was a little beat up, but it was nothing that Sapo wouldn't be able to attend to, while the rest remained unscathed. They moved to the 4 Merlins to kill as many as they could before they retreated back into the dark once they came. With the gatehouse strewn about with corpses, now was the time to construct a crematorium. Judea explained to the others that this wasn't about giving them a respectful burial, and given her track record of pursuing fleeing monsters and finishing them off to make sure they were dead, they believed her in an instant. She told the others that the rot from the corpses could make them sick, so burning them seemed the most obvious solution. The Adlets tried to clean up the mess caused by the raid. Luckily this time, none of the outer walls were breached, nor farm plots burned. Despite being wounded, Lazarus returned to hammering out his new suit of armor inspired by the chaos of the gatehouse brawl. The brigandine armor he inherited offered decent mobility, but it was ceremonial garb that didn't offer the coverage that true combat armor required. Tangier planned to return to the limestone outcropping to help mine a buffer for the next cycle of smog. Lazarus pushed himself a bit too hard, and one of his wounds from the last fight started to fester. Sapo ordered him to bed rest to recover more quickly. Between Sapo's diligent medical attention and encouraging words from his wife, Lazarus was bound to recover in record time. The crematorium was complete, and Judea took the responsibility of cremating the visitors' corpses. She didn't exactly enjoy the task, but the idea of cremating their corpses was hers, and she wasn't squeamish around the corpses like the others seemed to be. She swiftly hauled the corpses to the flaming mouth of the limestone cremation chamber and unceremoniously chucked their corpses inside. It took no more effort than hauling their corpses out to the marsh to rot, but this way the stinking rot wouldn't linger on the hillsides for weeks to come. The rotting corpses of maddened creatures should also be cremated for very much the same reason, but at least this was a responsibility she could share with the rest of the adlets. Sapo checked in on Lazarus's wound and saw that they were nearly fully healed. He applied one last poultice and figured he'd be back on his feet within a day or so. At long last, the gatehouse was finally completed, and work towards a prayer room could commence. Most of the prayer room would be constructed with timber floors, except for a few sections of natural limestone which would be smoothed out. The patchwork of flooring was a good analogy for the interwoven cultures of the Bison Glade members, made half of coastal adlets and half of refugees. Adding a section to the keep that was intentionally left polluted seemed a little strange at first, but everyone agreed that leaving the room polluted was both practical and stood as a symbol for their need to make more progress in cleaning the surrounding glade. Once their glade became more of a salix grove, the adlets could then afford to consecrate their prayer room with cleaning. Lazarus recovered from his infection just as Sapo had anticipated, and he felt ready to return to armor smithing. The keep was full of functional architecture and purpose-built rooms. In stark contrast, the adlets planned for the prayer room to be adorned with artistic carvings. The adlets felt like they were part of a movement greater than even themselves, so they sought to build a massive altar as a testament to their defiance against both monsters and pollution. The last of the discarded corpses were collected by Judea for cremation. The glade might not be clean of pollution, but at least all traces of visitors had been expunged. Lazarus had crafted an excellent suit of armor, offering far superior coverage than his inherited brigandine. He intended to armorsmith himself a new hauberk, but at least with his iron chose, armor, plate gloves, and boots, he was fully covered from slashes and strikes from raiders. Tangier returned to the southern mountains to chip away at the hilly outcroppings in order to make room for even more pollution to be decayed. Dave invited everyone to a party with no particular purpose other than to be brought together. The Adlets reveled and drank together, rest and relaxation much needed in the besieged keep. Thank you for tuning in to Hedge Knights episode 16, Faith. If you would like to support me as a content creator, please consider liking, subscribing, and sharing this with your friends. If you would like to become one of my Patreon patrons, a link to Patreon can be found in the description of the video, as well as a link to Discord if you would like to join my gaming community. Thank you so very much for watching, and a special thank you to my Patreon patrons, Twitch subscribers, and viewers like you that support the channel and made it all the way to the credits. Thank you so very much. I hope to catch you next episode. Farewell,